Okay, Homer, you had enough of my iced coffee. Homer? Homer, you drunk son of a bitch. Ah, you spilled it. And stay down there. Ah. Look what happened. Look what happened. He spilled my iced coffee. Anyways, welcome to Animation Domination. I am, of course, 22 Tiger Dude. So, we start off this night with The Simpsons. Well, this Simpsons episode is about when Homer and Marge want to help Moe, who is very suicidal because he is depressed about life. Moe's homemade alcohol pings the radar of venture capitalists. And then Grandpa, he was babysitting Bart. Well, technically, Bart was supposed to take care of Grandpa. But anyways, Grandpa gets very hurt after falling off the roof and going on the water slide. And so Bart must care for Grandpa. That's the subplot. So my thoughts on the Simpsons episode, I actually really loved it. I thought both of the structure of the story of the two storylines in this episode really worked. I really enjoyed the humor, and I dug the dark humor in this episode because you will get plenty of dark humor in this episode. So if you're a huge fan of dark humor, this is the episode for you. And I love this episode because, yes, the dark humor worked for me. It is a little depressing when they have all those suicidal references that they added in this episode. The subplot, I thought it was really nice of Bart to take care of Grandpa. It was a cute moment, and it was very sweet to see the two actually bond, even though it was Bart taking care of Grandpa, and even though Bart obviously didn't like taking care of him, but you know, the way they were bonding, it was really cute. And of course, it's predictable. It's not really spoiler alert because you guys are gonna predict all the way through. But in the end of the subplot, it turns out that Grandpa was already felt better a while ago, but he just continued to pretend he was still hurt so he could have a little more time with Bart. And that subplot wraps up quickly, and it was enjoyable, but it was depressing and dark in the Moe plot, and how that intertwines with the tone, that works. And that doesn't normally work for me in an episode, but in this episode, I loved how they handled it. The humor, the storylines, the tone, just how everything was placed in this episode, really immersive and impressive. So, I love this episode. It ends nicely for Moe in the end. He starts to get a more happier meaning of life, and it's nice to see that. And I'm going to give this episode a 10 out of 10. That damn Homer thinks he could just chug my iced coffee and spill it on the desk. Ugh, that son of a bitch. Whew. Next up is Bob's Burgers. In this Bob's Burgers episode, when Bob acts as a parent chaperone for the museum, he bonds with Louise, and Gina's friends go to look for exhibits based on the female anatomy. And then Tina questions how dorky she is with this other boy kid, and it's pretty much like who's the dorkiest kid contest. And then Linda helps the museum workers protest. So we have 4 different plots in this episode, and my thoughts on this Bob's Burgers episode, it was really good. I really liked it. I thought it was enjoyable. It had some funny moments, and you know, it's a watchable episode. Of course, the episode does have what most Bob's Burgers episodes have: annoying moments. Only difference that not as annoying as some of the other episodes I've seen this season. But there were a few very annoying moments that drove me a little crazy and got on my nerves a little. The plot with Linda protesting, I thought it was just kind of stupid and not needed, and I didn't care about that plot at all. The dream plot, it was just there, but I guess it's entertaining. The Tina and that other kid's name, I really don't know. The plot where they try to figure out who the darkest kid is. It's pointless, but it was watchable. And then we have the plot where Bob, Louise, and this kid with asthma, they go into this little jungle and no one's even allowed in there. And that was the best part of the episode. It was really that plot. I thought Louise was unlikable here. I didn't really like how she was disobeying Bob, but I got used to her after a while in this episode. Some of the humor worked for me. Some of the humor was stupid, a miss, and it didn't work for me. I thought the storyline was really good overall, even though the Linda plot was pointless. Didn't have to be there at all. The Jean plot was pointless, but somewhat necessary. And I could say the same for the Tina plot. The plot I care for the most is just the main plot. And that was really enjoyable. And Bob had a lot of character here. And Bob, he was just the best part of this whole episode. It was really enjoyable. I enjoyed that about Bob. It ends with a heartwarming moment. It has a cute, heartwarming moment between Bob and Louise in the end. So that's nice. And this episode gets an 8 out of 10. Really good. Ladies and gentlemen, next up is Family Guy. But we lost a member in this episode. That member was Horace, the bartender. Horace was not in the show that much. In fact, he was very underused for a bartender. And when the guys would go to the bar a bunch of times in the show. But now, this marks the final episode with Horace, the bartender. Because thanks to Jerome, who returns in this episode for smacking him with a baseball bat and just knocking him down and making him dead. Damn Jerome. Horace may not have been the most necessary character, but whenever he was on screen, he was enjoyable. I liked him, and it's sad to see Horace gone. So, rest in peace, Horace, the bartender. But in this Family Guy episode, what I'm about to describe, you guys could pretty much see coming, especially when a bartender just died. But it's about when the guys want to save the drunken clam because they want to close it down now that Horace is now gone, thanks to Jerome. And Jerome returns after like 3 seasons ago. I wasn't a big fan of Jerome in that episode. His appearance in this episode, though, well, he's barely in this episode, but when he was in this episode, he was actually more enjoyable than the role he had in Jerome is the New Black, that season 8 episode. His appearance is actually enjoyable here. And yes, Jerome is the new bartender for the Drunken Clam. It was revealed in the end, and let's see how that goes. As for this Family Guy episode, I really enjoyed it. The storyline was good. There were some very funny moments. Some moments so ridiculous it makes me roll my eyes. The episode does have boring moments also. And then we have the subplot with Meg working at a funeral home. That subplot, while disturbing, I enjoyed it. And I didn't like Chris in that episode. Normally Chris is an enjoyable character, but he was unlikable here. I just didn't like Chris. But he definitely got what he deserved. And how this subplot ended, I'm very satisfied with. Because what happened to Chris at the end of the subplot, that dude deserved it. I just didn't like him here, and I'm glad he suffered through the consequences because of what he did to poor Meg, since she didn't deserve it. So, good job, writers, for making Chris suffer and making Meg win. I really like this episode. I'm going to give this episode an 8 out of 10. It's American Dad This episode is a continuation from Naked to the Limit one more time. Remember the ending of the episode where Roger was supposed to leave, but he pushes Jeff and he ends up leaving in the spaceship instead. And so, after going the other half of the season with no Jeff, we finally get a continuation from him. And it's weird how they didn't just do this episode immediately after the Naked to Limit One More Time episode. Why didn't they just do this continuation after that? Like, it says here in the guide it took place months after the events, but in this episode, they didn't mention anything about how many months it took place or days, so it really wouldn't matter. And that's my nitpick with this, really, that it took them this long just to actually continue on from that previous episode. So it focuses around Jeff. It is a Jeff episode. You get no Stan, no Francine. Damn. You do get a couple of cameos, but that's really it. This episode, I really loved, actually. It was really interesting. The storyline actually went a little in depth with Jeff, and Sinbad actually made an appearance in this episode, and that was actually really funny and really cool. And just where the storyline in this episode is going, I thought it was just really interesting. It had a little bit of emotion in there, and yes, of course, you definitely feel bad for Jeff. So, not only did the episode have the humor in here, but it actually had the emotion, and it actually had the heart in here. And this might be one of the strongest American Dad episodes I've actually seen this season. Maybe if not, the strongest episode of the season. Because just what Jeff was going through and what we saw, and plus we do have a little bit of a backstory with the Emperor, which I won't spoil, but that was really cool, and it was the reason in that backstory why the Emperor won't let Jeff go home. And the episode overall, it impressed me. So it's good that it didn't just focus on comedy, but actually focus on in-depth storyline, the character development, all around impressive. I love this episode, and I hope American Dad goes for that kind of route a little more often, because what they did in this episode really, really worked, and it was awesome. It was amazing. It was fantastic. It just blew me away in terms of the comedy, how the storyline was going, how Jeff had to get out of there just to return home. This episode blew me away. I love this episode. The writers, Seth MacFarlane, did a terrific job. A phenomenal job. That's right. You're going to hear me say that word. They did a phenomenal job with this episode. Everything they did with the structure, with the well-told story, with the characters, with Jeff, everything. It succeeds. It's accomplished. And I just can't praise this episode enough. It's fantastic. And because of that, I am going to give this episode a 10 out of 10. And not only am I going to give it a 10 out of 10 because it succeeds in all that, but overall, it truly deserves that rating. And finished. Subscribe to my channel. Follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter. Comment and give me your thoughts on each of the Animation Domination premieres. Like and share this video. I hope you all enjoyed this, and don't forget that I will always have Tiger Power!